Hello, this is your professor Katrina Kopoloff, and we're going to look at color theory today, and I'm going to explain your 3 assignments. So let's start with the color wheel. We've got the cool colors on the left and the warm colors on the right. And let's kind of break these colors down a little bit. Everyone should already know you've got 3 primary colors, and these are red, yellow, blue. The definition of the primary colors is that they are the simplest form of the spectrum. They cannot be created using any other colors. Secondary colors take 2 primary colors, mix them together, and create the secondary colors. Yellow, blue is green, blue plus red is purple, red plus yellow equals orange. The tertiary colors are the colors that are next to each other sandwiched in the color wheel. So we've got blue and red makes purple. Purple mixing with blue is a bluish purple. Red mixing with purple is a reddish purple. So let's look at some cool colors that are on this color wheel, the left side. Cool colors recede into the background, and yet I place it on black so you can kind of see how it feels like it's going backwards. Some more colors against black. These are the warm colors, and you can see how it feels like it's pushing forward, that it's advancing towards the foreground. Now what happens when you take a warm color and you put it against a cool color? Red against blue, it's creating contrast. A cool color, purple, against a warm color, orange. This word focal point, it might feel like it's stamped into that orange and receding backwards. Let's look at some artwork that uses warm colors and cool colors. This is a piece by N.C. Wyeth. N.C. Wyeth here is using warm colors and cool colors to create the contrast and really focus on the figure. If everything was warm, the figure would kind of blend into the background, right? We've got these nice shadows of the birds, and it feels like they're kind of stamped into that orange. The warmness of the flesh tone against a cooler background creates the illusion that the background is far away, that it's receding, and the figure is right up next to us. We have another piece here by N.C. Wyeth, really intense blues, very cool, with the warm trees in front and some darker values in the front. This could also be thinking about atmospheric perspective, which means that things that are closer up are darker and things that are far away are lighter in value. Let's take a look at this boat painting by N.C. Wyeth. The sun is rising, and we really feel it coming at us, coming towards us, even though it is a image or a shape that is far away in the background. It's rising against a cooler background. Let's take a look at some complementary colors. The definition of complementary colors is that they are opposite each other on the color wheel. Orange and blue, red and green, purple and yellow. Tertiary colors can also have a complement. So in the assignment that's explained a little later, don't just go with your normal, everyday, already known, okay, we know the Lakers are purple and yellow and Christmas time is red and green. Think about also these lovely yellow greens and some purple reds. Those can also be complementary colors as well. What happens when we take two complementary colors, red and green, and we mix them together? OMG, what happens? You're going to create a brown, and you're creating a desaturated color when you mix two complements together. What is desaturation? That means it's the hue, and with the addition, mixing it with either black, white, achromatic gray, or chromatic gray. What does achromatic mean and chromatic gray? Well, saturation also synonym is chromatic, chroma. So a gray that is saturated, bright, or a gray that is not bright, that's dull. You can also mix a pure color with its complement to create a desaturated color like brown. If you're painting with water-based paints, either watercolors or acrylics, if you add water to the paint and dilute it, you're going to create a desaturated color. Saturation is the opposite of desaturation. It is also known as intensity. Chroma are synonyms. Chromatic is a synonym, meaning how bright is it color? How pure of a color is it? Let's look at some artwork that uses some really bright saturated colors. Keith Haring is known for his really fun, vibrant art, and yet in all of this brightness, we also see some desaturated colors like brown, as well as pink, which would be red plus white would give you that desaturated pink. So now we know that saturation means brightness, intensity, chroma. Desaturation means something that's muted, dull, or neutral. Therefore, they are opposites. They do not equal each other. Chroma, now we know what chroma means, chromatic and achromatic. So now that we know that they are opposites, what happens when you use them? A saturated color against a desaturated color might create some contrast and a focal point. So let's look at this boat again by N.C. Wyeth. What happens if he wanted to paint another boat and create another focal point and contrast, but without using any warms and cools? He only is going to use cool colors this time. So we can see how some blues, some areas are very saturated, intense blues, and then we've got some areas that are desaturated in the background to kind of recede and go back, to make it feel like this boat is really riding on something substantial that's separated. The sky is separated from the actual water, right? So let's look at some different kinds of desaturated colors. Tints, shades, and tones. A tint would be mixing white with your pure saturated color. A tone is mixing gray, which is black and white, with your pure color. And a shade is mixing black with your pure saturated color. And now we can see how N.C. Wyeth is using saturated colors, pure, intense colors, some more natural colors, right? These are still desaturated. Look at the warms versus the cools again. Warms in the front, in the foreground, coming at you. Cools in the background, receding. We've got some saturated blues, some tints, some shades adding black, and also tones adding gray. Thinking about lights and darks, blackest black, lightest light area of focal points there. Let's look at this other painting by N.C. Wyeth. Saturated colors here, cools in the background, warms, desaturated colors, right? Some shade, adding black, tints, adding light. So he's really working with color in a way that he's working really with value, looking at lights and darks, warms and cools, saturated areas and desaturated areas. So let's look at how do we actually use this in Photoshop and Illustrator. How do I actually get a desaturated color? Illustrator and Photoshop both have the toolbar on your left. If you double click on the color box, you're going to get something that looks like this. We've got hue, H stands for hue, S stands for saturation, B stands for brightness. So if I click on saturation, I'm going to get a slider and I can bring this down and make my color going from a saturated color to its desaturated color. We also know that it's creating a tint, adding white, getting that pastel version of your intense chroma. Let's go on to look at triadic color schemes. These are color schemes that have three colors that are equidistant, meaning the same amount of distance from each other, which in this case is 3 colors distance, right? So if I take the primary colors, blue, yellow, and red, they each have 1, 2, 3 colors in between. Your primary colors are triadic color scheme. Your secondary colors, purple, green, and orange, would be technically a triadic color scheme, and then your tertiary colors. So you can look at this and it shows you if I take yellow, green, I would take orange, red, and blue, violet, right? This is a good resource to use for your assignment later. Split complementary is taking one color, going across instead of the straight up complementary red and green. I'm taking red and I'm going to take the 2 colors that are next to green. So in this case, red with a yellow green and a bluish green. Keith Haring is using some split complementaries here in his art. Analogous color scheme means you're taking some colors that are next to each other on the color wheel, but make sure that when you're using analogous color schemes that you're choosing one color that all the colors have in common. So in this example, all of these colors have some yellow in it. Yellow, orange, and a yellowish orange would be an analogous color scheme. Bridge tone. What is a bridge tone? We're taking 2 colors that are disparate, meaning they're not similar to each other, beige and blue, and we're going to fill in the gaps. So 3 steps, and we're slowly getting into this blue. What colors would bridge the gap between beige and blue? So this is going to be one of your assignments that I'll talk about later. Assignment sketchbook number 1. You've got, the first step is to photograph 2 objects from real life that have 2 different colors. In this scenario, we've got a green plant and a yellow paint. And then you're going to create a bridge tone between the 2, going from green to yellow. What are the colors that you would have to use to slowly get into that next color? Example number 2, orange and blue. So showing orange, 1, the next color, 2, 3, 4, and 5 intervals to show the steps in color change from one color to the next. And you can do this either